Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the next session. This session will be held by Kevin Eaton. He currently serves as a GIS director for the Conservation and Environment Delivery Center, where he and his team oversee the GIS operations in the DEP, DCNR, Department of Agriculture, Milk Marketing Board, and Environmental Hearing Board. Kevin also serves as the co-chair for the Pennsylvania State Geospatial Coordinating Board, also known as GEO Board, and is the chair of the governance task force under the GEO Board. He is actively involved in furthering Pennsylvania's GIS capabilities. So, all to you, Kevin.
Great, thank you. Is the mic working? Good? All right. I appreciate the introduction here. A lot of you guys probably don't know what CEDC is. It is a grouping in IT under the Office of Administration that oversees DEP, DCNR, Ag, Milk Marketing Board, and Environmental Hearing Board. So when you see CEDC and references throughout my slides, that's what it refers to. So I'm going to go over some examples within the past year of how we use GIS to manage emergency situations that have occurred within the Commonwealth within our delivery center. She already covered my introduction, so I won't really go into this too much. Main thing to notice is that we do serve under the Office of Administration, which is directly tied to the governor. So a lot of our emergency requests have high priority due to the gubernatorial interest in them. What I'm going to go over today are some examples where we were reactive to situations that have occurred. Two of those would be our HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza application through the Department of Agriculture. And another one, which I'm sure you guys all are aware of, is the East Palestine, Norfolk Southern train derailment and how we responded to that in the DEP. We're going to also cover and spend a decent amount of time on our more proactive approach to managing emergency situations through our geographic emergency response application called GEAR. We built this custom developed for the DEP, but we've also have access to many other parties, including federal partners, local partners, PEMA, et cetera. So in the interest of time, we're just going to jump right into it. For those of you who don't know what HPAI is, it's basically avian influenza, what is dangerous to all the flocks across the country and spreads like wildfire. So there's a lot of attention spent on that, not only because it can wipe out our chicken flocks, our duck flocks, et cetera, throughout the country, but also has an opportunity to morph into what's known as bird flu in the human strains. 2023 was a particularly unusual severe HPAI year. In PA, we kept it pretty much under control, but other states around us, such as New Jersey and Delaware, had a really heavy HPAI hit throughout the year. The Bureau of Animal Health and Diagnostic Services within the Department of Ag is who oversees the HPAI and responds to it in our state. And they needed a way to communicate information to the community and especially to the farmers on actions they need to take in response to spotted influenza. So that's quarantine areas, control areas where they need to do certain testing, surveillance zones where they need to monitor the flock above and beyond normal monitoring and send in reports, and just general quarantine zones. And the solution needed to be stood up really fast. So we started getting basically just an avalanche of positive results and no way to really share the information. They came to us and they said, we need something to get out there, get our information out there and get it into the hands of the people that need it to be able to control their flocks. So what we did is we used an Esri commercial off-the-shelf product, web app builder, with the back end of a very messy, at the beginning, Excel sheet that was floating around Department of Agriculture, but we needed to work with what we had at the time. So we brought that right in and used it to create a web app builder application, which you see in front of you right now. This is the HPAI web address search application, and allows people to find out any active HPAI incidents and zones within the state, and how close they are proximity-wise to those zones, and what kind of testing requirements they require. This is the live application. It's kind of boring. It's not avian influenza season right now, so you don't see much on the map, except a couple general quarantine orders down in Lancaster County. But just a quick overview of how this works before I show you a screenshot of it when it was more active. You can put your address in here. You can click on the map and find if you're in any control zones, surveillance zones, what sort of actions you need to take. Like I said, there's not much on here. What we did do, though, is when we find a positive, there's a lot of concern with being able to keep that data anonymous so that people's farms aren't identified as to where that hotspot came from, where that flock was infected. So as you can see here, when I zoom in to a certain distance, we turn off all the layers so that you can't identify a specific farm associated with it. We're going to move back to, that's the wrong one. Show you a screenshot from when it was more active. You can see here, there's controlled infected zones, buffer zones, surveillance zones, all over the map here, down in the Lancaster County region. We tested a address in this screenshot. We just actually clicked on the map here, and it shows you all the things that you need to do in this pop-up. So farmers were coming into this app and finding what they needed to do every single day with their flocks. In this instance, there's a special alert even beyond the control buffer zones, beyond the surveillance, beyond the general quarantine, that really made live bird market a special emphasis in this area. And this was set up really roughshod at first, and then we went back to the back end and cleaned up the data stream to bring us nice, cleaner data in here in a more controlled method, and not just an Excel sheet that was pulled together from various sources to get that initial product out there into the hands of the citizens. So that worked really well. Oh. The next application is the Pennsylvania DEP response to the East Palestine train derailment. Everybody's very familiar with this. The complication we found with this is that there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, in this response, right? We had federal partners, we had private people, we had state, local, we had Norfolk Southern itself out here, we had contractors coming in, doing surveillance, sampling, everything. And it was all sort of roughly organized by the EPA, but DEP in particular found a need to communicate the information that they were doing on sampling to our citizens within Pennsylvania, because there's a lot of concern that some of this stuff that came off this train, especially the burning of the vinyl chloride, was causing sediment to fall into their land, into their water sources, and really pollute their lands and the water they drink. And there was a lot of concern. So we needed to put out a product that showed where DEP was sampling, the results of the samples, when it was being sampled, and they really wanted this to be animated as well. So they wanted to show the progress over time as to, we sampled 5 today, we sampled 11 the next day, show that the efforts were expanding and continuing to make people feel more secure. For this, we went to the Experience Builder product with Esri, and stood up an application that is still live today and is one that I'm going to be showing you live here. So this map was a long time in making in terms of getting it to the final product that it is today. We had several drafts that went all the way up to the governor's office of communication back down. A lot of powwows with how we should approach this, with the actual people in the labs taking results of samples, giving them to us, communications people, the secretary of DEP. It was a very, very high level effort. what we came up was the app you see in front of you, which shows essentially the locations of our testing, the type of testing that was created, whether it's soil samples, water surface samples, well samples, et cetera, where the actual incident occurred, and the status of those samples. In addition to the status, you can also click on any one of these and get a pop-up with when it was sampled, the sample ID, and the results of the sample. Now, we don't have the actual finite results on these too often. There's basically a level where they said we wanted to show non-detected, right? So people realize that it's not a significant threat. If it's not detected, it's not even in that sample at all. So we needed to make sure that this was geared to have citizens be able to understand it too, and not just scientists be able to understand it. So this is what we came up with. And you could see there's quite a prolific sampling occurring around that zone. Now, what they also wanted was to be able to animate it so they could see how the sampling was occurring over time. And what you see here, push play, and you can see the samples as days went on beyond the actual incident of expanding efforts, being able to show that we are concentrating in one area, move to another area, move to another area, and make sure everything is kosher. So those are reactive methods that we use to get information out to the public. That's not always the best way to do emergency response. You want to be able to sort of pre-plan and do stuff in the field while the incident's occurring, as opposed to sort of a post-incident situation. So what we did is we worked with the DEP's emergency management team and went to what we called the Geographic Environmental Emergency Response application called GEAR. We wanted to allow our responders and people in the field and people in the offices making decisions to be able to use tools on the fly to respond in a much faster method. They required the ability to visualize air plumes of pollutants, trace contaminants down a stream for a spill, understand nuclear evacuation zones and how to approach those if an event of a release comes. And they required it to be a highly controlled application. So it's not public access at all. They have final approval over who all can access it. I got approval today to be able to show off this product and sort of demonstrate it to see, so that you guys can see the capabilities that we have and we are building. And we decided to move with a custom development of an application from scratch using our CEDC GIS application framework. This framework is something that you'll see in all of our new applications that we put out here in CEDC. You'll see it in applications like the DCNR Interactive Map, PA Geode. It all has the same look and feel and allows us to do stuff a lot faster, low code environment to stand up applications. So let me just switch over to that application. And what you see here is the sign-in screen. I wanted to make sure that everybody saw that this was indeed a secure application. So this application uses a backend called Keystone Login, which is a enterprise-wide application that allows people to use credentials to verify their identity. And it uses AD for CWAPA people, which is what I used here. So you'll see here a lot of disclosures that information in here is confidential. Sometimes I'm not going to be showing you too much of the confidential layers. But we see that the site contains sensitive information. Data should never be shared beyond what I'm doing today. So this is the general layout of our GEAR app. We provide many tools for the users that I just talked about, the ability to trace downstream for a spill incident, the ability to search a plume model and see what's underneath it, and the ability to identify nuclear facility evacuation zones and facilities that might need to be assisted and notified during an evacuation. We got the traditional things in here that all apps have: identify, elevation, layers, base maps, measures, etc. But I'm going to show you some of the cool tools we have here that we built, starting with the trace downstream. So this is a really simple tool. A lot of times, emergency response situations, the call comes in that we have a spill. They'll get an actual latitude, longitude of that spill, and they'll be able to put that in there right at this screen. But sometimes they'll also just say, you know, it's at some intersection of roads. So they have the ability to just set that point right on the map and say, you know, this is where the spill occurred. We have parameters that allows people to adjust the impact zone of that downstream contaminant. So I can say this is just going to impact 1,000 feet of a buffer for a distance of 12 miles downstream. And to perform this trace, what we're doing is we're leveraging the abilities of Esri COTS services that they have on their server, sending this off, letting them do the analysis, pulling that information back in, and allowing it to be mapped on the screen here. So this is the result of a trace downstream for 12 miles. We have the ability to choose any water service supply areas that might be impacted by this contaminant in the water. I'm not going to show you that because that's a bit confidential. We also have the ability to show any entities within that buffer. So if there's any wells being pulled from that in that buffer, if there's any nursing homes within that buffer that would be impacted, things like that, we'll find everything in that area and be able to list it down here. There's only one item in this situation, and then you can click on it and zoom right to it. This is indeed a water supply well. It gives you all the information about that ownership of that well. So this is very, very useful when it comes to you know, spills, any accidental industrial leaks, any contaminants that are a liquid form and can go into our waterways, basically. All right, the next tool that I want to show you guys is the plume model, which is a really cool tool. This one was fully custom developed by my team. And I'm going to use a demonstrative shapefile that I have here. When it comes to plume modeling and tracing, we don't actually do the modeling ourselves within the DEP. We rely on our federal partners to use their models and supply us with the outputs. So one of those is the high split model, which is sort of what this is imitating here. So what we do is we bring in the shapefile, which is just a zip file full of all the components of a shapefile. It brings in the boundary of a polygon. In often cases, when you get these models back from the federal partners, there will be 30 different polygons on here. So it really takes a lot of expertise by the DEP team to know which one they want to choose. For this purposes, I only put one in there to make it easier on myself and for everybody to understand. You go down here, in here, and you make that the active plume shake because, of course, in this case, there's only one. And then you set the point source of the plume. So it's approximately there. And then same thing, we find any affected entities within that plume that need identified and contacted. In this case, we have 174 facilities and entities within that plume that, you know, will be impacted by it. We have contact information, type, fully filterable. So if I want to see hospital, with that. And once again, it zooms in, you can get all that information. And then the final thing is the ability to do nuclear power plants. Very similar. These are the evacuation zones for a nuclear power plant. We can say the wind is coming from 35 degrees. So I should be selecting L and K, which will be where the fallout's going, and it finds the affected entities as well. So that is, in a nutshell, 3 of the items that we are working on and have worked on in the past year for the Conservation Environment Delivery Center. And I try to keep it fast, but I'm running out of time. Are there any questions?
So after you get that information, what's the next step? This is super cool. Thank you for showing us that. I didn't know
Sure.
you had this, but so when you have 171 entities affected, what happens next? Just curious.
Yeah. So, during emergencies like that, there's levels of activation and there's whole teams of people that do all sorts of jobs, right? And then you see this at the PSAPs, you see this at, the 911 center, you see this in DEP. So we have different people that are assigned to do different jobs. So there's people that reach out to the hospitals. There's people that reach out to private landowners that are going to be impacted. So it really just filters down to whoever needs to be doing a certain job during a certain activation. Yeah. Yep. So access is controlled by the DEP emergency response team, but they allow access to certain members of PEMA, certain members of local enforcement at the PSAPs, whatever the activation requires. So we can even get federal partners in here and everybody. Yep.
I was thinking about it specifically with the avian flu thing. Could that be similar situation used for like the spotted lanternfly, or say like flood prone risks or drought areas, that might be in a buffer or a zone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, the application for that is pretty endless. We do have another application specifically for spotted lanternfly because a whole different host of requirements for that, especially when it comes to commercial people. But that general scenario and the way to present that information is very applicable to many things where people are going to be impacted. Then they need to find the information based on a location of their address. So, yeah, that's a great thought.
So would this the gear, would that be able to be used for like potential risks?
Yeah.
Like say there's a proposed facility that if it has a meltdown malfunction, like to think about potential evacuations for that?
Yeah, absolutely, and it currently is being used for that. So there's training exercises that occur in PEMA and other areas where they do pre-planning for situations like that. Exactly, and that application has been already used in that scenario and will continue to be used as we move further down the development line as well. In the back.
I see that the Gear app has a lot of custom widgets in it. Is that completely custom, or is that using the dev edition of like Experience Builder or Web? It was completely custom.
It's completely custom. We built it from scratch using React and a JavaScript application mostly.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, I think I'm out of time. If you have any more questions, feel free to get with me. I'll be sitting in the back for a few minutes. So thank you.
Yep. All right, our next session will start at 2.